Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Obituary Season 1, Episode 5. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love how this episode showcases how you never quite know how certain storylines are going to end up being so massively plot relevant. The whole Rose and Mal of it all, because Sylvester's wife was figuring, why was my husband out there when he died? That's not the direction going home. So I kind of figured that would eventually lead back to Mal, but I didn't really know that it was going to be as extensive as it was being down the rabbit hole. Then you also have the Goose storyline. I'm like, oh, because even Emerson's like, oh yeah, it's going to be whatever. He's like, oh, I got to really work on this Goose storyline when he's focusing more on the Maria of it all. But it's also because him and Huey are having those whole back and forth. Well, Huey's doing it just for the satisfaction of, well, he cares about it, but maybe he'll also write a story about it, which we know Emerson's writing a book about it. So both of them are kind of in competition, which I love later on. It's like, oh, how close are you? I'm pretty close. It's like, well, baby. He's like, I'm this close. And the moment Emerson leaves the room, he's kind of like, damn it. And then Huey's saying damn it at the same time. Not the word they said. Obviously, it's per the early on in the video, so I'm not going to drop those. But yeah, I just thought that was so interesting. Of like, yeah, you're competing over solving this woman's murder. You both have different vested interests. I mean, Huey's are more personal, but it could turn into something profitable, like Emerson's his reasons for doing it. But either way, let's break this all down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the Rose stuff. Like, why she ended up, that seemed like that was a little bit of a, should you really be doing that? I don't think it's relevant, but I guess, so, you know, Sylvester's wife has like enough pull, because Sylvester was pretty powerful in the town, and I'm sure by extension that refers to her as well. So maybe it's also because Rose likes her, like they're friends enough that it's like, right, I'm gonna look out for her in this regard. So she ended up getting the phone records and ended up seeing the eggplant emoji. So she ends up calling the number and ends up. I was like, oh boy. You're going to end either. She didn't answer, luckily, but her voicemail is set up. So Mal, she finds out it's Mal, and she ends up bringing her in. And there's a whole rigmarole of, oh yeah, like, you know, I was trained that, you know, basically when the person you're interviewing has to pee, that's when you question them the most. So, and I love that little back and forth of like, what's this? It's like, oh, it's an eggplant. It's like, no, it's not this. Well, yes. What's the other word? It's like, oh, it's another name for an eggplant, which I'd never. Maybe I'd heard that word before. I don't think the other name for an eggplant. I don't think I've ever heard that. I've just known it as an eggplant. But obviously, like, we all know the colloquialism of it, just what it represents in emoji space of, yeah, it represents a penis. So I even love Rose being like, it's a cock. And she's like, wow, Mal's like, I don't know what cocks you've had to deal with. Poor you, like having to deal with some cocks like that or something. But yeah, it eventually comes to light, and Mal's biggest concern is if Sylvester's wife finds out, she'll kick her out. It's like, that's the only house I have, and I won't. What's going to happen to me, like, if I find. But Rose is like, I'm going to give you the chance. Because she had said, like, I was never going to get in the middle of an affair situation again, because when she was younger, she found out of her dad having an affair, and then she told her mom, but her mom forgave her dad, but not her, which actually kind of, I think, plays into episode 1 a little bit too, where like Elvira had talked to her mom and everything. So I think that's probably where their relationship had initially soured, and that's why it probably cuts even deeper of like, oh, me and my mom have a good relationship now, because I tried to be honest, but my mom, like, it led to a contentious relationship between us. And so she's like, I never want to be in that situation again, and if I have to be the one to bear the bad news to Sylvester's wife, that's going to blow back on me, and I'm not going to put myself in that situation again, essentially. Like, I don't want someone basically hating me for being the bearer of bad news, even though you asked me to look into it in the first place. So Mal is so concerned about, all right, I got to figure out who did this. And I love that she pieces it together. I love it too, because like last episode we were making it seem like, oh, Mal's an airhead or whatever, but it's like, no, she ended up figuring it out. She played detective this episode, and she worked backwards to figure it out. And she ended up being like, yeah, oh yeah, like we were supposed to hanging out that night, because she was, you know, for like trying to pretend like, oh, I'm forgiving you, I'm sorry, I was drunk, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. And so when it's all said and done, she it's like, yeah, like you liked Emerson, you thought it was going to be a date, because she ended up kind of, which ends up being a core fact of, once again, the psychology behind why Mal is kind of like the steal, why she steals the way she does. Even she kind of broke it down psychologically, which I thought was interesting. It's like, oh, do you think our mother's deaths changed us? Because she's like, I think it did for me. I ended up stealing. I steal because to make up for what was stolen from me. And it's like, what did I do? I stole Emerson from you. I clearly knew that you liked him, and I kind of stole him from you regardless, which plays into a larger theme in the episode we'll get to in a second. But I thought that was so interesting, her having that perspective on it. I'm like, was she just like freestyling, or was she actually being truthful? I mean, because I think maybe there was also a little bit of a parallel, considering she knew that, well, she was believing that Elvira had taken her phone to send that text to Sylvester. She didn't know why, and she never really questioned why. She was just wondering, like, did you do it? Because it's like, because she's hoping that she can find the mysterious texter, then Elvira could take the brunt of it, and maybe it'd be like, oh, Elvira's the one that was actually going to meet with her and kind of make the affair situation kind of fall more on her bestie. I don't know, like, if Mal had really thought that far out. We don't really know her plan, but I mean, it was like, oh, I'm gonna clear up my name. This way, Sylvester's wife doesn't get pissed at me. She gets pissed at Elvira because she'll be like, oh, Elvira's the one that texted him. I guess there were no other records because maybe they had deleted them, but maybe Elvira had never deleted that from her. Well, I don't know. That's why I'm curious, like, what were their exchanges like beforehand? I wonder had she didn't, because she, for Elvira to have used that, I mean, like, that had to be something that was already part of their thing, right? For him to know to come meet at their spot or whatever. But maybe, because I was like, she looked through the records. 'Cause I was about to say, like, because Mal would have noticed that, so it had to be a thing if she sent the message and then eventually deleted it. But obviously, your phone records keep a lot of that, keeps all those messages and stuff. So, or rather, you know, like a record of those messages. Because that's why I was wondering, like, if you went back farther enough. I mean, maybe they only keep the records up to a certain point in time, so maybe that was never their exchange. Once again, it's been a while since I saw episode 1, so I don't think we ever saw how they like set up their meets, you know. So maybe that was just one Elvira freestyling, and now that's coming back to bite not only Mal in the ass, but ultimately going to end up biting her in the ass. Especially, too, considering like where their relationship is, too. So I think Mal might have been a little more willing to throw Elvira under the bus because they weren't in a good place when this all kind of initially started. So, which is sad, too, because Elvira was already having questions about, like, do I kill Mel? I kind of don't want to. Especially because she kept thinking back to, like, a memory, like, I think that fortified their friendship was, hey, these girls were talking shit, calling you names, so I beat them up, and they never... Yeah, like, you know, that was, like, her bruiser buddy, where it's just like, yo, like, people talk shit, they get hit. No one talks about my friend Elvira like that. And it's like, yeah, she's legitimately the only friend you have. Not only is she your best friend, she's your bestie best, and she's the only friend you really have. So now you're conflicted because you're like, I kind of want to kill her because I'm pissed at you for leaving me for dead all those years ago, but now I'm also like, you're my best friend, and you know, it's so ironic and interesting that she was in the process of forgiving her because the whole conversation last episode, oh, if you found out, would you forgive me? And it seems like she ultimately is able to. Once again, which is so ironic because she was so trying to prove a point last episode about forgiveness when she was talking about the woman who lost her husband and child to George drunk driving, which once again, as we know, it was actually his brother Leonard. But then Elvira was so certain about sticking to that point, and it turns out she hadn't really forgiven George and was using it as a business opportunity. Her phone's been blowing up, you know, business wise and stuff. So it's just, but that ended up being this moment of remembrance for Elvira because she was able to dig up a memory that was so deeply buried from all those years ago. So it's so fascinating, and layers upon layers of how that all works, and how those episodes in particular 4 and this one like work so in conjunction with each other in that same capacity of just like how it's all weaved together. It's so interestingly done. But like I said, like, we try to like chalk her up to being dumb, but I guess it's also like, right, her livelihood's on the line, because it's like, yeah, I'm going to lose my house, so it's like, hey, Elvira, could you, this song, you don't like it, it's playing so much, huh? Why don't you go ahead and change it? And she puts in her code and stops the music. It's like, oh yeah, turns out you know my password. I was like, wow, Mal is pretty goddamn crafty. Holy shit. And it's just like, all right, so what do I do? So she decides, like, right, I'm gonna have to do it. I'm gonna have to kill Mal. Like, she knows. So, like, she might not know that I'm responsible for this, but most likely, like, she knows that this will just be a trail of breadcrumbs that I don't need leading back to me. So she decides to order Chinese, specifically the kung pao chicken, which does come with nuts. I mean, I guess it depends on the place you order it from. Like, you can order it without the nuts, I believe. I mean, I think every place allows you to order without the nuts, or like, because it can have actual peanuts in it, and I'm sure they also cook it in peanut oil too, maybe. Either way, I was like, that is messed up. But and Mal's just eating the food and there's no issue. I was like, did she not? I was like, okay, so she ordered it for herself and she didn't trick Mal, because she probably knew that Mal wouldn't eat it. But it's like, no, Mal still ended up eating it. But that's after Elvira went to the bathroom and was like, I can't do it. I can't kill my friend. And when she comes out, what's happening? Mal is eating her food, and it's like, oh, there's peanuts in this, and it's like, yeah, there is. I was like, wow, because they set this up last episode too. Once again, and it ends up being the lone thing of, oh, I guess I should stop, quote unquote, stealing your food. But remember the moment they had together early on in last episode, they were in a very contentious point. It's interesting how they have like this very contentious relationship, like or a back and forth this episode over food, when the same thing happened last episode too, because she was like suspicious of like, oh, what's going on between you and Emerson, like that. Now we have like the influx of that, and she went in, she was kind of in that mode last episode, and now she's in that like inquisitive mode, being like, okay, what's going on here, this episode as well. But Elvira was like, go ahead, let's switch. She's like, no, obviously I'm a vegetarian. It's like, dude, I know that you were going to probably want some of my food, so that's why I'm already prepared. I'm always prepared for it. So it's always a thing of like, she always kind of, quote unquote, steals her food to some capacity. So that's why, so it's so interesting that it's like, right, she didn't even have to give the food to Mal. Mal just naturally ate it on her own. That's probably maybe what she eventually knew, because to be fair, that's why she specifically ordered it for herself. Like, she didn't just trick Mal, because she's like, well, if I give it to Mal, maybe she won't know. But also, she was probably still struggling back and forth. But she knew by ordering it herself, Mal would eat off her plate. I'm like, dude, once again, the layer said that because she knows her best friend enough to know, like, yeah, you're going to try and snap on my food, steal my food, But in that moment, Elvira had decided she didn't want Mal to die. So it's like, all right, let me get your EpiPen, because she's going into anaphylactic shock. But it turns out the EpiPen's from like 2008. I mean, I guess I get it. You've been very good about it. It's probably just a money thing of like, you probably don't have your insurance and it's just too expensive to like to buy. There's a lot of medical stuff that it's like, without insurance, you are fucked. Because it probably costs a lot. I'm actually curious, like, how much would an EpiPen, like, on its own cost if, like, you didn't have insurance? Maybe it's not as expensive as I'm making out to be. Maybe it's just an assumption on my part, because, like, so much stuff does cost a lot of money without insurance. But maybe that's why, because as we know, Mal doesn't make the most amount of money. And maybe it could also just be, like, a laziness thing on her part. It's like, I've still got it. I mean, it might be from, like, well over a decade ago, but it's still going to be good, right? Quote, medicine doesn't technically expire, right? So that probably could be her justification. Or like I said, it could just easily be a money thing. But either way, it's like, now it's like, crap, what do I do? And so she calls it like an ambulance, and luckily a doctor shows her like, okay, you gotta like basically cut open her neck and like poke something into her trachea to make it so that she can breathe. And it's like, yeah, it all worked out in the end. I love that Emerson came in with her having a knife in her hand, but luckily Emerson being there allowed her to get a pen, and she was able to use that to make it so that Mal could breathe. So it's like, oh, it worked out. But what's also interesting too is Elvira kind of felt a certain way, because she was like, wow, Emerson saw me. It felt nice. She won't go all the way with it, obviously, but it's like, for a second there, he thought I killed Mal, and it kind of felt good. She's like, it's probably a twisted situation to be happy in, but like, it felt good. It felt like he finally saw the real me. I mean, especially when you tie all this in with, she was talking to Andrew earlier this episode, because he's kind of doing like an assisted suicide situation, and Elvira kind of opened up to him, because it's like, right, you can't really talk to anybody. And he was kind of she was like, oh, like, I was thinking about killing my friend. It's like, should I do it? And he was blinking yes. And she's like, wait, what? are you serious? And he's like, yeah. And it's like, and then he starts. It's actually really dark when it's like, wait, you don't want to die, you want to live? And you're like, is your wife making you do this? And he's like, yes. And then he stops and kind of like his expression lightens up. I was like, that's actually really cute. I was like, that's amazing. But then like Elvira's like, yeah, but you know all that stuff about Mal. Like that was just, I mean, she never said Mal's name specifically. She was just like, you know that person I was talking about. I've never actually heard anyone, right? You got that, right? You understand that, right? He's like, yeah, we're having a dark moment. Like we were just joking, so he probably didn't think too much of it. But there could always be something later on that comes up about this. Like if something had happened to Mal, then it probably would have been like, ugh. But why would anyone immediately go to Andrew to like question him about it? But you never know how the breadcrumbs could have like, how the trail could have led to Andrew and how they could have eventually, how something could have found its way leading to Andrew to Elvira. So like you don't know. Because these clues come in the most mysterious and interesting ways. But I want to go ahead and finish what I was starting about Elvira, specifically her and Mal, how that the end result played out in this episode, and it was so good. Where it's just like, hey, I'm here for my friend, and we finally got the truth from Mal as a whole. Like this is what I thought it was. It turns out that Mal ran away just like I thought she would. Because of the reason why I thought so. Because once again, as we saw in that flashback, she still had Maria's bag. So I was like, right, you don't want to be caught with it. But she also said, like, right, I knew how you were struggling, what you were going through. So I thought, hey, this is what you wanted. Like, you know, kind of parallel to the Andrew storyline this episode. And she was like, no, I get it. I think the Andrew of it all probably kind of put that in perspective for her. So she was like, no, I get it. I understand. You were trying to help me out. Because I was trying to give Shooter some bail last episode, being like, well, maybe Mal didn't see the meds, but I mean, to be fair, they were sitting like right beside you. They were in kind of clear view. It kind of seems like Mal did clearly see them too, but it turns out there was something else going on. Maria was shot, and she was in the back of your trunk, but like Elvira didn't really think too much on it. Well, she found her shot. And so, because didn't she say she was in the back of your boot of your car? But I don't know if that was kind of implying like Maria had moved her to the back of the boot, or whether it's just kind of implying like no, Elvira had put her back there. Either way, because Elvira wasn't really asking the questions of like, wait, that was the same night me overdosing and like Maria's death. Like she didn't connect the dots. Like, wait, why was she in the back of my car? But it's like, no, but she was moved somewhere else. That's why I was like, wait, does that mean like I said, the whole point was she was shot, but I was like, does that mean Mal had, because Mal was like, oh, I'm going to try to help her, but then she said like, oh, if I don't help her, if I do help her, she's going to make sure everyone knows that I'm the one that stole her bag. Like, I don't know if that happened. Like, I don't know if it's a situation of they were having that confrontation and then she got shot by Elvira, if that really is the case, not unless they're going to do a last minute switcheroo of it being someone else. But I don't know if that's what happened. But like I said, she was going to say like, hey, I was going to leave you basically both for death, because if Maria had told the cops, that would have been it for me. That would have just sucked for her. So she didn't want to get in the middle of all that. So once again, it was self-preservation, the reason why she bailed. That was my, like I said, other than like the reason she gave in for Elvira last episode, I had kind of figured the bag was kind of like the main reason why she kind of bailed. She didn't want to get caught with it and stuff like that. But Elvira still doesn't, like, she's got so much else to focus on that she doesn't really push back to ask like, she did ask in the moment, but it's still a thing of who moved her body, because her body wasn't found in my trunk. So, but she's not really pushing because like there's so much else she's got to deal with. So it's like, you know, it's like, okay, but her and Mal are in a good place now. It's like, no, I do forgive you. Oh, we're good, we're great. And then she made it clear to Mal, so you're going to take responsibility, right? And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, yeah, you're going to tell Sylvester's wife that it was you. You were the texter. And she's like, but no, I'll lose my house. It's like, yeah, but you asked me, did my mom's death change me? And she's like, yes, because my mom taught me the lesson of self-sacrifice. She sacrificed herself so that I could be born in this world and live. So you'll be fine. And it's just like, oh, where's Emerson? It's like, oh, Emerson's chasing after that Goose story. It's like, well, sadly, Mal, that's how this goes. You know, when you're part of the journalism game or like reporting game, it's like, yeah, that kind of comes first before any and everything. But Mal had that moment where it's just kind of like, she kind of saw a side of Elvira she hadn't quite seen. Like, she knows how off Elvira is, but in this moment, she was almost like, oh, holy shit. And it kind of sours their relationship because it's like, cool, you keep my secret. And, yeah, so that's the only fair thing. It's like, you keep, you know, all this secret and you take the fall for Sylvester, you know, self-sacrifice. Because I know you'll do it for me, right? Bestie, you know, so it's like putting her in such a complicated spot. So that was kind of like a very dark moment where it's just kind of like, oh shit, like shit just got real, and Elvira saying all this with such a chipper disposition does not bode well. I mean, but it's like, hey, it's better that she could have murdered you like she wanted to, but hey, you're alive. You're just kind of, it definitely is going to sour their relationship, I think. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the aftermath of that's going to be. But circling back to the Goose of it all, it is interesting how that all plays out, because we found out, okay, so the Goose is missing, and like I said, Dolly, who owns the Goose, like, we know she, like, writes down, like, people's license plates and make and model of their car and what time frame. I'm like, how's that going to be relevant? It ultimately comes together so beautifully at the end of the episode. But also, like, she's missing a Goose, and she wants Emerson to find it, or she won't talk to the paper. But then it's like, if we find out the Goose is actually inside of Huey's house, which I'm like, wait, why the fuck did you have the Goose? I don't get that. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why did you have the Goose? But then I'm like, wait, because Emerson did say, like, right, maybe it just got out, but I think it's because I was thinking Dolly was telling the truth, where she's like, oh, someone stole it. But it's like, why would why would Huey need to steal the Goose at him? So it's most likely, like, maybe it broke into his place. Maybe he had a whole bunch of newspapers down, so it's almost like he was compensating. So it does seem like it was there. It doesn't seem like it got, how would it get into his house otherwise? He realizes someone was there because the Goose got out. I don't know if he was like pumping the story by like, oh, by keeping the Goose, he was creating more and more of a, like, what was the relevance of that? Like I said, not unless I'm completely misinterpreting that and the Goose was just broke into his house. But like I said, there was newspapers everywhere on the ground, like he was keeping it there in case the Goose had to like use the bathroom or whatever. So I'm like, I don't quite know what to make of that. I mean, whatever the case may be, it got out because Ward went to the office while they were having a meeting, stole Huey's keys, went to make a copy of it, returned his keys, went to his house, went looking to find what he actually knows. It ends up finding like a letter to Maria, so he knows like there was something going on there, but obviously like she was already married, and it's like, what are you doing, Huey? So like no one must have known about their affair. Which is so interesting too, because Emerson actually went to Tom about an actual Goose, which is so interesting that Ward didn't piece that together, because he had just run into said Goose a couple scenes earlier. So I thought that was so interesting. But it's like, yeah, he was actually there about that. He wasn't even there about, because Tom just assumed like, oh yeah, Emerson's on the story, like obviously like he's come to me, but it's like trying to put pressure on Ward. But it's like, yeah, Emerson's kind of connected Ward to some stuff last episode. He even talks to Elvira about that, which even that's kind of a balancing act, where it's like, well, he's kind of accusing my dad of being responsible for Maria's death. It's like, no, he moved the body, didn't do the deed itself. It was actually his daughter who did it. I'm assuming by the time he found the body, like I said, unless there was like a last minute switcheroo of like, no, she didn't actually do it, and they were covering someone else's crime essentially. But when it was all said and done, like, I'm curious, was Maria still alive by the time Ward found her, or was she already dead? Did she already like bleed out and die? Because it makes that situation a lot darker if it turns out she was actually still alive. I mean, that'd be even interesting, because if she was still alive, that might mean that Ward might have... Well, I think parallel-wise, it'd be even more poetic, because what happened with the deer? It was suffering, and Ward's the one that put it down. So maybe it'd be very poetic that he didn't just dispose of the body. He didn't just move the body. He actually finished her off. Because it could easily be a thing of he could have covered her mouth and made it so that she died from lack of oxygen even before the gunshot wound. Because obviously there were no other external wounds except for the gunshot, at least that we're aware of. So most likely maybe he just covered her nose and mouth and just made it so that she stopped breathing and finished her that way. Because I get the feeling if that ends up being the case, it feels more poetic once again than bring it full circle with a deer situation. But like I said, it all comes down to whether or not she was already dead by the time Ward got to her. Which, speaking of Ward, which I think it's so interesting, his luck kind of screws him over again because home dude he kept owing money to, he ended up giving him the winning ticket. What was that, episode 2 or 3? And this episode, he was on a machine, and the guy was like, yo, this is my machine, move. And the moment the guy plays the game, the slots, he ends up winning. And it's Ward is the one that just put money into it. It's just my luck, someone else snatching up my luck. So he does try to contact Elvira by the end of the episode because he's probably right, it's probably time for me to tell you what's what. I need to talk to you now about stuff, so... Which I'm curious to know how Elvira's going to feel once she finds out the truth about her dad, that he became the way he did because of her. That's going to probably, be a little hard to process and deal with, but we'll see. We also had Huey going through... Clive's, belongings and stuff, and ended up finding his files, and he had left a note saying right, if you the person who got away with Maria's murder, maybe they committed other murders. So he was looking at deaths that took place sometime after Maria died, because it's hey, if the killer got away with it, who's to say they didn't go oh, maybe I can keep doing this. And so it's so interesting too, because Elvira didn't start killing anyone until super recently. Funny enough, the death, because obviously it happened while Clive was still there and was still alive and fine, and I think because he hadn't been let go before then. I think, didn't he get let go before then, or what? What didn't Sylvester die afterwards? I don't remember. It's probably the last thing he was kind of looking into, really. But Huey was kind of oh yeah, this poor bastard, he's delusional. Because even Clive was yeah, maybe I'm a little crazy for even kind of looking into that too much. But ultimately, Huey comes back to it, and he flips over the article about Sylvester, and it's oh, look into his med. So he hits up the coroner, and then he starts looking and piecing it together. It's Elvira covered this. There's another suspicious death. Written up by Elvira. Another death. Elvira, boom, boom. It's all these deaths had been happening in town recently. It's a little suspicious. And especially when he at the end of the episode gets the report from the coroner about, once again, it's Elvira accidentally killed him. Yes, she planned to, but she forgot to switch the medication back, so that ended up setting all this in motion. And at the same time, Emerson was helping out Dolly, and then he found out about her book and the car and everything, and actually following her records back to 5 years ago, because her records are that extensive, that it's wait, this car around the same time Maria had died drove one way, then it drove back through what was it, 4:15 or 4:45, something sometime in 4 in the morning. And it's do you know who owns that car? And so, yeah, he's piecing together. Once again, he was already looking at Ward, and I think it's still oh, I'm looking at Ward, I'm not looking at Elvira. I think it's Ward's, well, it is Elvira's car, but he's suspicious of Ward and not Elvira, but maybe he's piecing it together. I don't quite know. But Elvira looked at George's, she was looking through the trash and seeing, all right, the pages that Huey had printed out of the obituaries, and she looked through it, and then she looks and sees that Huey had previously looked at all these files 2 days ago, which is interesting because the way it's cut, you wouldn't. But I mean, maybe if you go back, you look at the different time frames of showcasing that it was in fact 2 days ago. But either way, Elvira's kind of got her sights set on Huey, right, he's suspicious of me now, so no longer trying to kill your best friend now, you're moving on to your boss. So I do believe Huey's probably going to die at the end of this. I have no idea. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how all of this, like, it's coming down to the wire. Obviously, we're going into the, I can only assume it's a season finale. I think I haven't looked into it ahead of time whether or not there's going to be another season or not. But it's going to be interesting to see how this all concludes and comes to an end. And I just get the feeling like Huey's not going to make it. But, well, like I said, we'll have to wait to see how all these revelations and all these connecting dots, because it's all closing in on so many fronts, whether it's the Huey front, whether it's the Ward front and Tom, or whether it's the Emerson of it all, and Elvira being at the center of all of it, and her trying to figure out and decide what she's going to do. So we'll have to wait and see, but I'm excited to find out how this all plays out. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.